Hello, and welcome to Recruiter.com and Professional Diversity Network's A Seat at the Table. We're excited to have you join us today for this panel discussion. I'm your host, Andrea Del Angel, Marketing Manager at Recruiter.com. During our time today, we will be discussing effective ways to foster DEI in the workplace and learn about how to build a truly inclusive company culture. Joining us today are our panelists, Megan Bizzuto, President of the International Association of Women, Simone Merritt, Human Resource Specialist at Black Women Talk Tech, and Wanda Jackson, Senior Vice President of the National Urban League. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to shout out our friends over at Professional Diversity Network, and in particular, Mike Hall, Executive Vice President of the organization, who helped us invite all of our lovely panelists today. Professional Diversity Network helps promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace with effective recruiting. The organizations represented by our panelists today are their partners. Now, before I ask the first question, can the panelists please talk a little bit about their respective organizations and what they do?
Sure, no problem. My name is Simone Merritt, and I am the Human Resources and Operations Consultant for Black Women Talk Tech. Black Women Talk Tech is a company that was fostered by two founders, Regina and Asosa, who have put together an environment where minority women can present their businesses and have a seat at the table, have the opportunity to be put into rooms where doors have already been opened and conversations have already been set so that they can get the resources that they need in order to continue to elevate and develop their businesses in the tech industry.
Awesome.
I'll go next. Oh, sorry, Wanda, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I work for the International Association of Women. I've been the president of this organization about a year and a half now. We are a community for professional women, no matter where they are in their career or their business journey. We cater to sort of a diverse audience in terms of lots of different backgrounds, lots of different skills. We provide networking opportunities, professional development, and lots of other benefits to help women to rise to whatever their next level is. And we do that through all of our online events, through some now back to in-person events, and lots of community and connections through our platform.
I'm Wanda Jackson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Human Resources for the National Urban League. The National Urban League is a historic civil rights organization dedicated to economic empowerment. The Urban League collaborates at the national and local levels with community leaders and policymakers and corporate partners to elevate the standard of living of African Americans across the nation. We've got 90 affiliates serving 300 communities in 37 states, and we serve over 2 million people a year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for your insights into your organizations. So let's get started. The first question I have for you guys is, what are the differences between diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So I'll go. Diversity is really about difference, and kind of at its core, at the beginning of sort of this work, it was called just simply diversity. And then really inclusion was kind of added next. So it was D&I. And that was really about belonging and people feeling like they could bring their authentic selves to work and that there was a place for them and people respected them. But the equity part is a little bit different. And that sort of seems something that's been included in the last 5 years or so. And so we got DE&I. And so it's giving people what's necessary to be in the best position to be successful at an organization. And so it might be some coaching and counseling, it might be some certifications, and maybe some other things, but whatever it takes to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity.
Awesome.
I would have to agree with Wanda on that. The equity portion is fairly new for us. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen it be incorporated even more. And my take on equity is, again, like what Wanda said, fostering the fairness, and by understanding what the policies are, knowing how you can put people in certain positions to continue to elevate them and make sure that they are being provided with the resources and tools necessary to be able to perform adequately in their roles. Same with, inclusion. I feel like it's the practice of providing the safe space where everyone feels like they are welcome to the table, regardless of, ethnicity, religion, race, or any of those things. But it's the action behind what diversity and inclusion should be in our workplaces.
I think they both summarize this really well. There's an analogy that I've seen float around often that likens it to like a party where it's like diversity is everyone being invited, inclusion is having a ramp so everyone can get in, and equity is making sure everyone has access to do the things within the party. And I think that helps kind of frame the three. I think they all work very well in tandem with each other, but frame it as the three pillars.
Awesome. That's a great way of summarizing it, Megan. So this question kind of feeds into this, but what common mistakes do you think companies are making when it comes to DEI today?
For me, I think the action. Everyone has a DEI plan, but do your employees feel that? Is it embodied in the culture of the company? And what actions can you pinpoint that prove that you are actually actively working to make everyone feel included? Especially that equity portion. Does everyone have the same access? Is everyone being treated fairly when it comes to the abilities to be promoted, to get the additional training and resources? So for me, it would be, identifying if the action is actually taking place.
I also think it's important to put resources behind your DEI initiatives. If there's no money, if the person doesn't have the opportunity to launch programs within the organization, the resources to network and support other organizations that might allow you to drive value to your organization, that's problematic. And also making sure that it sits in a place where the decision-making allows this person to really make an impact and not just sort of window dressing and say, we have a department that does DEI, but we have somebody who has the resources and the wherewithal to really make a difference and help you reach the goals on those plans.
Yeah, I think I would reiterate, I think the lack of financial resources to support these initiatives, I think we see a lot of people raising their hand and saying, okay, here's our program. We have a banner up, right? But if there's no funding to support whatever goals, I think the second piece is a lack of well-defined goals. So we kind of put these umbrellas up to raise awareness, but are there really well-defined goals? And are we collectively getting feedback from all employees, or did somebody at the top make a decision about what everybody else needs? And if that's the way it's working, then most likely you're accomplishing nothing. I think you have to start at the bottom, surveys and getting collective input from the people who are going to benefit most from the programs. And we often see this, I think tone at the top is very important and support at the top, but they can't be making all the decisions. The action has to come from what people say they actually need, not based on what somebody assumes you need based on their own status.
People at all levels need to be articulating what's going on and know that it really is happening, not just sort of a statement, window dressing, things like that. Everybody really needs to feel the fact that you're making an effort.
Absolutely.
And I think also it goes to be constantly like rechecking. So like a lot of companies can be like, oh, we did this once. We surveyed people once. And no, it's like a continued like action that needs to be fostered like every quarter, it needs to be consistent in order for it to actually make any sort of difference.
And I think that's where if you have set goals with actionable outcomes and you have a system in place to measure what you're doing, then you can actually see that progress. But it's not a one and done, right? No. This is not you just put up one post and we're good. This is a continuous effort. And I think it has to be supported as that throughout the entire organization.
It's a journey.
It is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It does not stop.
So now that we talked a little bit more about the mistakes that companies make, what can companies do to create an inclusive environment that's not just lip service?
I think it kind of ties right into what we were saying as far as having those goals, having that funding, because it's one thing to have a plan, but if there's no action, if there are no resources, then you're not seeing, it is lip service. It is a window dressing, and your staff will feel that. It will start to display in their productivity, their work ethic, their quiet quitting. It will become something that is extremely noticeable. And for me, I think, avoiding the lip action, it does start with surveying and understanding what the needs of your people are. But most management, and what I've seen with some of my clients with very traditional leadership in place, they tend to want to make those decisions and not realize the biases that they may internally have. So I think the acknowledgement and awareness of what you should be looking for inside yourself when you do sit in those roles, to be able to develop a really good culture where diversity and inclusion can be seen and felt. You have to, leadership has to take a look at themselves and make sure they are also progressing with the change that is taking place in the workforce.
And I think it's also about the commitment. And so if you're developing relationships with organizations for recruiting, and this is Recruiter Got Time, so this is the perfect place to say this, right? It can't be a one and done. So you can't just show up at an event one year and not show up the next year, or make a contribution, in 2020 after George Floyd was shot, and then suddenly the next year it's not in the budget and you don't make a contribution any longer.
Right.
So figure out what the strategy is, and have an ongoing relationship with organizations. And quite frankly, sometimes it's a 2 or 3 year strategy. I was with some people just this week, and I heard them say, we're here at this event, we're trying to figure out what we want to do next year. We have a 3-year strategy to show up X way by 2025. So you have to think about it that way.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's really important to look at the long-term strategy, not just the short-term kind of the awareness campaigns that we see pop up when certain activities happen. I would say education has to be really, really important, and not necessarily education internally. Like, invest in bringing people in that know this really well. Invest in programs that we know, like, based on the research, based on what our organization is telling us, based on our employees are telling us, bring in resources to support the work. Otherwise, I think you start to see leaders develop within the workplace who support these initiatives, but support them based on their own beliefs and their own values, and not necessarily educating based on what somebody who's trained is qualified to do.
Exactly. What do you guys think is the most difficult part of implementing a DEI program well?
I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is that while we've seen a lot more work in this area in recent years, it's still very new, right? And we're still testing a lot of things, and there's no perfect roadmap. There's a lot of best practices and things we know work, but I think that we have to have the hard conversations, and people don't like to have hard conversations. There's as a white woman, I have a lot to learn, and I lead an organization that is full of professional women. And I often say, I don't know your experience, and I'm not going to sit here and preach to you based on what I think it might be. I want to hear your experience, and let's have a conversation how to best support you based on my knowledge and based on your knowledge coming together. So I think it's that there's no clear roadmap, but it's also that we really have to have the difficult conversations and get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I think it's about people buying in also, though. And so you'll have someone at the top who's really committed and wants to make things happen, but then sometimes things get lost in the middle, and you have to hold people accountable. And so maybe the bonus is tied to the success of you achieving your piece of the metrics or whatever it is. And then people, I think, sort themselves out. Either you're going to get on board or you're not.
You're not.
And then
I love that accountability. I love the accountability piece of it. Yeah. Tie it to your compensation, right?
Right.
And suddenly you're going to see bigger, faster results.
Yeah.
I love the accountability portion as well. And but not showing, as the liaison for the staff, it being tied to compensation, you definitely probably will get the action. But is that still a form of lip service? Because are you actually dedicated and committed to what the change needs to be? And that can be seen by your staff if they're only doing it because their quarterly bonuses are coming up. Or do I really feel that leadership they're concerned and they want to know my experiences. They want to know my story and how they could better assist or provide the resources that may be more beneficial to me in my situation or my counterpart in theirs.
And so I think it's also important, like, I guess also to be, like we talked about before, be willing to listen to your employees, and be willing to like continually ask them and make sure that these programs are resonating with them and that they're feeling like the effects of it, right? And they're feeling like welcomed, included, because a lot of the times like upper like management thinks that, oh yeah, they're working really well, and like your employees still don't feel that. So
Right.
yeah,
This is
just
where
making
I think a survey can be really helpful. I think
Mhm.
having, even if it's a quarterly survey, right? 10 questions, make it quick and easy. But make sure you're consistently giving them avenues to feedback to you. Anonymous surveys, I think, work great because then you get real, honest answers. But you have to be continuously monitoring.
And then you can measure against yourself with the survey. So, you know,
Right.
Absolutely.
In time, we've done 4 surveys and see the incremental growth over the year based on the things. And here's what we did to get there.
Yeah.
And I just agree with Wanda said again, that buy-in, seeing that buy-in will impact how those surveys come back, because you'll get some very truthful responses and they just don't see the buy-in taking place. And then and what does that mean for your company? Is that something as simple as, utilizing your internal communication to announce other events that happen in your staff's life outside of their work anniversary? John and Michael got married. Are you showing that you are inclusive, and that regardless if I got married or if it was John and Michael, everyone is treated the same way and is celebrated, regardless of what their situation is.
Exactly. So what do you guys think are some creative ways to like proactively source candidates from underrepresented communities, as we were talking about?
I think you have to go to those communities. I think you have to spend time investing in relationships in those communities and be a part of those communities. You can't show up once. You can't just show up when you have one job posting. You have to make it a part of your brand. The other thing I like seeing companies do is create scholarship programs that actually help to build the skills within those communities. So reaching people before they're even ready to find a job, but get them younger, get them into a university program, get them the skills so that once they finish their degree or finish their training, they're available for hire, and you've helped build that.
I think that I would also say that it's important for a broad spectrum of organizations to do that, because young people in groups of color can't see what they could be if they don't see someone doing that work or someone who looks like them is doing that work.
Right.
And so that's really an important thing to do, to make sure that you kind of have people who want to work for you who are diverse because they know about you. And the support is important too, whether it's scholarships and other things, scholarships, internships, job exposure, all those things are important and kind of lead. But again, it goes back to what I said. You have to make a long-term commitment. It's not a one and done. It's not a let's look and see this is where we want to be and we're going to give it a year and see what happens. You really have to make a long-term investment and commitment.
I agree wholeheartedly with the both of you. Even down to reaching the younger communities, participating in the high school job fairs and having the long-term commitment. They see this company here yearly. Okay, I'm a junior this year. I may not qualify for the scholarship, but I know next year I'm looking forward to seeing that company. And then they have the opportunity to kind of research, see someone, actually working in that environment that looks like them, comes from their background, and then knowing and can trust the program and the process, that they are committed to showing back up.
And then also, I think it helps with like creating a safe space, because if you know, like, oh, I know so and so works at so like X company, like that creates like a link between both of them. And then once that person is in that company, if they decide to join, they already have like a little community already inbuilt. And that also is important for making the program as a whole successful, because then they feel more linked together, right?
Mhm.
And if they're
So-
linked and the program is being successful, they can get that feedback. Like, I can honestly tell you their D&E program here is great. Like, you'll love it when you get here. And that works, but based of all of our other, questions, the buy-in, the resources, the funding, having those things there and they're actually working, it can really benefit you if you're being consistent with your long-term plan.
Mm-hmm. And then like the community will be more easier to create, because you already have all of those steps taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll just create itself. If you foster that environment, it will. So what advice do you guys have for companies that want to get started with DEI or want to be more serious?
Figure
I
out where you
definitely.
want
Oh,
positioned in the
sorry,
organization.
Ms. Wanda, go ahead.
Yeah, figure out where it's got to be positioned in the organization. It really needs to, successfully report to the president. And I'm the human resources person, but it doesn't necessarily belong in HR. It kind of
Right.
needs to have its own identity, and
Yes.
it really needs to be held accountable for the metrics because they're part of the organization's metrics.
That is spot on. I think a lot of companies have a tendency to just throw it in the HR department, and it is a standalone, because the accountability portion is across the company as a whole. It's not just from the employment side of things. So, being able to have that, and it can be seen. You see me from an HR perspective, am I writing you up? You don't know what I'm coming about, but knowing who your D&I person is, I know what this person is doing. I know what type of initiatives and actions they're coming with. It creates it helps with the culture, and it gives it its own area, so that it's not grouped with, what could already be a predetermined, emotion or experience out of a different department.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. I think I would go also back to setting the clear goals and objectives, but not making them overreaching, not sort of setting us up for failure. Like, start small and roll out small things. But as we said before, budget. I think so many times companies are afraid to throw money at this, and they should be investing in the tools and the resources and the education.
Yes. Not, Googling a template and
Yes.
trying to put together your own D&I, but really getting the education necessary, because that, if you don't, you're not going to really cultivate and foster the department for your company to really experience it, and to see how it can transition and change the culture. So I think that's the big thing. Some of my clients are like, here's our D&I, plan. I got it off Google, and I'm like, okay, let's back up several steps. This isn't the right way. They're good. These are good, points, and it's a good guideline to kind of get you started. But that education portion and really understanding what it means to put the funding behind it is very important.
And then I think it's also important to like make it personalized to your organization as well. And not, just adopting what other companies have done. It doesn't
Every
necessarily
organization has a unique culture.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
you have to make sure that it's aligned with your culture.
Right. Because what Coca-Cola is doing may not work over here, at a manufacturing warehouse. You definitely don't want to be using their D&I from their plant.
And so our final question for today, well, from me, then we'll open it up to the audience. But what are some long-term benefits if companies embrace DEI?
You have everybody at the table. And so when you're ideating and coming up with marketing ideas, et cetera, you have everyone at the table who can kind of give you a perspective and make sure that you hit the mark, as opposed to kind of coming at it from left field, being blindsided by something you weren't aware of, but that's because you didn't really have everybody at the table to give you their perspective on what you needed or what you didn't need. And at the end of the day, the companies that are doing well in this, for the most part, really do see great results in terms of their financials.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think the financial benefit, I think that there's data out there, right? There's lots of studies, there's lots of things you can go look up in terms of the financial, the benefit to the bottom line of having these strategies in place. And then the other thing I would add on is employee retention. You have happier, more engaged employees, which helps contribute to that bottom line.
And even recruitment. I think
Yes.
that millennials and Gen Z folks, they look at your website. They're trying
They
to see
do.
if they see themselves there. They want to see what your commitment is. They're very sensitized to it. And sometimes you're going to lose if you're not positioned the right way and communicating the right message.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with both of you as far as the message that you're putting out and the bottom line when it comes to the retention on the employee side, and then just the branding and what it looks like for your company and how that influences your finances. I love to use Kroger as an example. You were really able to see when more people sat at the marketing table with the new video, the new commercials and all the dancing and all of that. That's definitely a different, direction that they chose to go in that you've never really seen out of a mainstream grocery store. And it's almost like, I want to go to Kroger. I don't mind going there and shopping. I'll drive past the Publix. It's okay. I love the image that they're giving off. It's giving inclusive. It's bringing more people, involved in the commercial. And it's an animation. It's not even like I'm looking at, humans, but it's very catchy. But it diving into it more, you can tell that the company is open and they're listening to a larger audience versus, a 5-person small marketing team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely very, very apparent when companies have a diverse team and when they don't.
Right.
I just like to think of the Twitter fleets, and that just says everything you need to know about Twitter. But so moving on. Thank you for our conversation. We're going to open it up to the audience questions. So I will make sure and ask some. Let's see. So we have someone here asking, how can I support DEI efforts at my company? And so I'm assuming that they are not directly like leadership, but like more middle or like entry level.
So get involved in the employee resource groups or the business resource groups, so whatever they call them, affinity groups, whatever they call them at your organization. Hopefully they're focused on impact. And if that's a way that you can be engaged, you can do your part there. And to the extent that you're interested in doing more, that those are the places where you get opportunities to do more.
I agree. Getting involved.
Yeah, I want to reference, we had a speaker at one of our events. Her name is Lexi B, and her talk was about how to be a freedom fighter. She goes into, no matter where you are in an organization, no matter whether there's structure or not, everyone can play a role in helping others feel included and helping others come to the table. So look for opportunities where there might be one person who's not being included and figure out ways to include them, or look for ways to, if you're a manager or a supervisor, look for ways to give recognition to other employees, whether they work for you or they work in organizations you work with. But think about how you can carry messages through regardless of what structure is already in place within your company.
Does anyone have anything else to add before we move on to the next question?
Okay.
No? Okay. We will move on. Let's see. So this is a question. How can I make sure I'm holding my company accountable with their initiatives?
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
I think being transparent, with your communication, especially in the event that the survey options are being provided. I see so many companies that, spend money on different platforms to be able to put the surveys out, but the employees aren't participating. And if you want to hold your company accountable, you have to chime in, you have to be transparent and communicate, hey, this program is, said to be up, but I haven't received any communication. I haven't received any info on how I can even participate or be involved, because sometimes without proper goals being set in those programs, the accountability portion is being missed. So doing your part and making sure you're being transparent about your experience with the programs and the activations that are in place, or the lack thereof.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think sharing open feedback, like as most employees, most organizations have a system in place where we review goals on a regular basis and we can provide input and feedback on our own work products, but make this conversation include the DEI initiatives as well. And if you're not seeing something, ask your supervisor, ask your next level director, push them for answers. Don't let them say, hey, it's coming. And I think if you're in a place where you don't feel like you're getting the support you need, or you're not getting the things that were promised when you took the job, don't be afraid to walk away. I mean, I think that working in a company that truly values you and what you bring to the table and supports you in the most meaningful way is going to prove better results for everybody. So be mindful of where you're at, where you're working, and if they're not doing the things they've committed to do, maybe it's time to reevaluate.
I agree with Megan. I think you do need peace of mind, and I also think trying to position yourself in roles that will allow you to impact and make sure that they say they're doing are things that are really happening is another way to do it.
Yep.
Agree with that.
So we will move on. I was gonna add something, but then I was like, no, I'm just gonna leave it at that because you guys mic dropped. It was good. Wait, sorry. I'm like looking through. Oh, we have a question for Simone. So what do you see as the biggest inhibitor for your org in getting the word out?
I would say the source of communication. My main industry, our staff is everywhere across the United States, and they work different hours. And it's harder to put activations and initiatives together when we don't have everyone in the same place. And they're technicians, they're not just virtual, remote workers. So still trying to create the culture and the environment and pushing the activations out, so that everyone can still feel included and involved when the industry doesn't really allow for a lot of Zooms or in-person meetings. That has been like the biggest challenge that I've really seen. And I've had to be very creative with how I do smaller group settings. When I know the people on the West Coast, I can do something with them this day or this time. The people on the East Coast, even though it's not all as a company in a whole, but still being able to communicate that these things are available. You do have these options. Know you're busy, but don't want you to forget about this. And I know I probably come across a little annoying to them at times, because it'll be an email, it may be a Slack, it may, be a personal pin or a full all hands on. But I try to make sure I'm continuously being transparent in the communication of everything, since people are all over.
Awesome. We have time for one last question. I noticed I'm very conscious of time. So the last question will be, if I witness something at work that is not inclusive, how can I help? Should I pull my coworker aside and speak to them?
I think if you have the courage to do that, you should. Sometimes people just can't, but if you have the courage to say something, you should just go ahead and say it.
I agree. I think just like if you saw someone snatching someone's purse, your natural reaction is going to be, hey, whatever you need to, how you bring some attention.
911, right?
Right. I know we have a generation where we'll pick our phone up to record it very quickly, but not stopping there. What's the next step? Okay, you're seeing it, but how do you hold the organization, the leadership person accountable for what you just saw? And are you going to take that part? Takes a lot of courage as well, not just to say something to one individual, but I don't want to say something to my manager out of fear of retaliation, but being able to feel comfortable knowing that this was not right and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think I agree with what both of you said. I think having the courage to call somebody out if you see something not inclusive, it depends on your relationship with that person. Often they may not even use it as a learning opportunity, right? Oftentimes I think we do things and we don't even realize because we don't have the perspective of somebody else. And so use it as a learning opportunity. If you're not comfortable doing that, go to a peer or go to a supervisor or go to a mentor and get their support in having the conversations. As I said before, we have to have the hard conversations, right? And I think that once we do it once, it becomes easier. But these things aren't always easy to talk about. But if you want to change something, you have to start taking action.
Agreed.
And I'm sorry, I'm curious. Would this change if the person was like higher up, like way higher up? How would you approach it in that way?
So now at this point in my career, I would have no problem calling out someone higher up. But when I've had moments very early in my career where I was called out for my age, I was called out for my skill, I was called out for many things, and I did not have the guts to say, hey, that's not fair. Like what you're saying is wrong. So I went to a mentor and she helped me navigate this space and it was resolved. But I think that, again, look at it from an education opportunity, and most likely the person higher up doesn't know, and you'll be respected more for bringing it to their attention, possibly, as long as it's done in the right way.
I think there's risk that most people try to weigh, depending on how high up the person is. And in companies that are smaller where D&I has been thrown into HR, it could be even harder because if you're a large company, you can immediately take this, to HR as an issue there. But delivery, understanding the proper way to bring it up. You don't want to say the wrong thing to the wrong person and get the negative reaction. But if you're coming from a place of concern and utilizing it as a learning experience, delivering the information to the proper person may, prove to have better results.
Wanda, do you have anything to add before we close out?
No, I think they've all said it. I mean, I think you do have to be sensitive to what the risk is, and then figure out a diplomatic way to say what you need to say.
All right.
And with that, we will say thank you so much. I want to thank you all, first the panelists, for doing such an amazing job and handling all of the questions with grace.